Hello and welcome to the Inter-Service Physician Assistant Program Guidance and Frequently Asked Questions webcast. I'm Colonel MJ Ellis. I am the branch chief here at AFPC's Biomedical Sciences Corps, and I'm also a PA. With me today I have Ms. Michelle Cardassi, who is our education specialist, and Major Will Schultz, who is an IPAP instructor. So we also have with us some of our BSc team and some of the IPAP admin cell. I'd also like to thank them for coming and supporting us, and also a shout out to the IPAP Air Force webpage that collected the questions for us today that we'll be answering. So our goals are to review the guidance for selection year 2019 and also to answer those frequently asked questions that have been submitted. So before we start, if you want to comment where you're watching us from, that would be interesting for us to know where we're reaching. Also tag anyone that you think would benefit from this webcast and the rebroadcast, and give us a thumbs up and tell us how we're doing. So we're going to start with the initial page 1 of the application. And you'll also see that if you don't know where to find the application guidance, there is a link with this webcast that tells you where to go. It is a CAC-enabled site, so it's for those that have the CAC to be able to reach that. So the key dates are that the application window has opened as of Monday, the 1st of October, and applications can be submitted between now and 25 January 2019. The selection board will occur in March timeframe, and the results typically come out about 4 to 6 weeks later. When you are selected for IPAP, there are 4 classes starting in August of 2019, December of 2019, and April of 2020, and August 2020. So 4 classes will be selected in our March selection board. So getting to some of our first questions, there is a question about how many applications we typically receive, and I can tell you that last year approximately 300 people initiated an actual application. Several dozens more actually had some queries about the program, but we had 300 people initiate an application. Once we were past the deadline and screened all qualified members, approximately 150 people met the selection board, and last year the selection number was 55, both officer and enlisted, medical and non-medical backgrounds. We had another question about the changes in the number of class dates, and that has not changed. We still have the 4 class dates, and so the number of applications we're taking isn't affected by the class dates. And also we had a question about the guidance coming out a little bit sooner than July, August, and that is based on feedback we get from the board and putting out that guidance. Sometimes there are last minute changes, and we'll be talking about the SAT question a little bit later in the broadcast. So we'll get to that. We realize that that was a surprise, but it is something that came down based on accreditation. So we appreciate you being flexible and rolling with that. And then the last question in this section was about, it was a general PA question about family medicine, internal medicine, and are there any other opportunities for other specialties for PAs? Within the Air Force, we have emergency medicine PAs, we have ortho PAs, we have ENT PAs, and we have general surgery PAs. We have PAs that work in flight medicine, that do PRP. We have PAs that do international health. We have PAs that do many, many things. The list is too long, and we don't have time in this broadcast to cover that topic. But there are a lot of opportunities. But initially, you will be assigned to family health. And that's why we ask that that is where the priority of your shadowing occurs. So when we move on to section 2, which is about the changes that happened in 2019 selection board application, and again, the SAT question will be answered in a few minutes, it was about the National Guard and Reserve eligibility. And the reason that we do not have any reserve or guard slots is because the need for the Air Force active duty mission right now is the priority, and we are undermanned in PAs, and we need to grow as many active duty PAs as possible. And so for the time being, there will not be any Guard or Reserve accepted into IPAP. And that may change in the future. It depends on our authorized and assigned. So more to come on that someday in the future. So keep looking back. So moving on to section 3, which is about waivers. So when we talk about waivers, waivers are possible, but this is a very competitive program. And you want to comply, is our recommendation, with all of the requirements, at least to the minimum standard, if not above the minimum standard, and not ask for a waiver. Because of the volume of applicants we get, it is in your best interest not to need a waiver. However, if there is a circumstance where you are unable, for circumstances beyond your control, to complete a waiver or to complete that requirement, then absolutely ask for a waiver. And if you go to section C of waivers, it says that you need to send a very detailed email to the IPAP Academic Support Cell. And that's how you start the process. It doesn't have to be an MFR, just start with that initial email and we'll have a dialogue and we'll see where we can go from there. All right, so now we're going to move into section 4, and I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Carnassi.
Okay, good morning. So some of the questions about military eligibility were about a waiver. Should the waiver memo be explained as to why there was a break in service? So anything that you have in your career that is not clear cut at first glance requires some explanation to the board. It's an interview. You're going to want to explain that as clearly as possible in an MFR, and that can be uploaded into Unicast in additional documents. The next question was about being 21, and does that negatively impact your application? Certainly not. There is no age limit to IPAP, and they aren't going to go, oh, you're 21, let's pick on you. No, you're good. Do I need to notify my career field with your intent to apply? I will do that for you. I will contact the assignment officer with your intent to apply, and then if you are fortunate enough to get selected, then as appropriate, I reach back to the assignment officer and we coordinate through that whole process. So I do all that for you. The grade, time in service, age are all very self-explanatory. If you have anything in your past that is going to cause question to the panel, you're going to need to explain that in your Unicast application. This is your interview. And so you had something happen in your past, you had an LO, letter of reprimand, or an Article 15 that'll show up in your SURF. You need to explain that. The next question was about an officer who cannot have more than 8 years of maximum service while enlisted between 2 and 14 years. So does the maximum 8-year service apply to commission or total service? So we want the applicants to be in the right phase of their career as well. So we like to make sure that the criteria is the set standard. So if you have over the 8 years, which I think now it's changed to 6, so if this question, he is not eligible, or she, because they are over the 6 years that is required for time in service for commissioned officers. The active duty service commitment is 4.5 years. That gets updated by myself. You have to be of high moral character and be well-rounded individual. Again, you can't have court-martial convictions. And then any medical qualifications that will all get worked through your 422. The security clearance, you must have a security clearance, and your citizenship must be verified. And then there's a plethora of academic requirements that Major Schultz will talk about.
Good morning, my name is Major Will Schultz. I'm one of the faculty members at IPAP, and I'm going to be covering some of the academic requirements questions that you guys have for us. First of which is there a list of acceptable schools for the required courses? And our only requirement for that is for it to be an accredited college or university. That's it. So it can be a community college, it can be a university, it can be a service academy. As long as it's an accredited school, then that should be perfectly acceptable for the board itself. The next question is in regards to reviewing transcripts. When I went through the application process, I worked with the education office at the base that I was assigned to, and that's what we recommend for you guys to do as well. Now, we oftentimes get questions about specific college classes, and when you look at the course description, you guys will ask us questions, well, does that course meet the requirement? And if it's something where you're not quite sure and your education office isn't able to clarify that, then you forward that course description to our academic cell, and we will get clarification for you on whether or not that's going to meet the prerequisites for our application. The next question is in regards to the age of courses. So it's highly recommended that the majority of your credits come within the past 5 years. And it also talks about it in the math science section that we really want those within the last 10 years. Now, you can apply for waivers, as we've talked about in the application process, but the reason for the time limit for those courses is because you're going to repeat some of those courses when you attend our program. And if you have not taken those courses recently, students will oftentimes struggle because of that. So we can do waivers, but it's highly recommended that those courses are within the last 5 years, because if not, students will oftentimes struggle because of that. Now, if it's an elective or a social science class and you have one class that's older than 5 years or potentially 10 years, certainly we will look into that. But of course, we'd like the classes to be taken as recently as possible. So another question with regards to the SAT, a student that had a bachelor's degree and they wanted to know if they could have a waiver to not have to take the SAT. And unfortunately, as Colonel Ellis said, the SAT, it's an accreditation standard that's unified across the services. So unfortunately, we do have to have students take the SAT, and the goal is for it to be within the last 5 years. The next question is in regards to the essay portion of the SAT. If you guys look at the guidance that we put out in regards to the SAT itself, it talks about looking at the math grade and the English grade, and we didn't talk about the essay grade on there. So if it's not mentioned in the guidance, then you shouldn't really worry about that. So we're looking really at the math science at this point. So that's what you need to shoot for, because those things that we're looking at as far as the minimum requirements, those are the things that we're going to look at when we actually score the packages during the board itself. And the last question is in regards to, I'm sorry, I've got more after that. Sending the SAT scores with your application. Yeah, so you're going to upload your SAT scores via Unicast. There's a question about multiple SATs. Is it frowned upon for you to take the SAT multiple times? We're gonna look at your highest score. That's what it boils down to. There was a student that asked a question about them getting their bachelor's degree many years ago in English, and those courses were quite old. The question was in regards to having to retake courses. As I've said before, we'd like classes to be less than 5 years of age, if at all possible. But if you have a degree that's in a different focus other than a math science focus like we're looking at for IPAP, that's certainly okay. The big thing that we're looking at with your prereqs is making sure that those prereqs are recent. But having a degree more than 10 years ago is certainly okay. There's a question about math science courses in particular with repeating courses. Students oftentimes, when you finish high school, you'll get into college and you maybe didn't do so well in some math science classes. The goal of these prereqs is for you to have a solid foundation in math and science when you start our program, because we're going to build upon that foundation. So if you didn't score as well in a particular course, we recommend retaking it. I do realize it's October now, and the application process is going to close out in January. So if you don't have time and you want to apply, as long as you're meeting the minimum requirements, you can apply. But your package will be much more competitive if you do if you have the time to retake those courses and get a better score in those courses, because it's going to do nothing but build a stronger foundation for you to build upon. And there's a question about the medical terminology course. How do students get access to AKO? On the last page of our application guidance, there's a link to our academic cell, and the academic cell has a sponsor with the AKO, and we have a prefab generated email that we'll send out to you with all the specific instructions on how to take the medical terminology course. If you would like to take it via a regular college institution, that's certainly acceptable, but if you want to take the free one online, we're more than happy to facilitate that happening for you.
And that's also embedded in the PDF with the application if you go to the KX site where you find the application. So you'll find it there as well. Great, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so now moving on to the letters of recommendation in section 6. We had some questions about shadowing, or initially it was the commander letters. So we have created a standardized fill-in-the-blank letter for your commander that is, they either are going to recommend you or not recommend you or highly recommend you for the program. And really, we only want that document. We do not want them to embellish and add any additional information. We will get that information from your other letters of recommendation and your letter of intent. So please just use the standardized form only for the commander's letter. And so for other references, I recommend you use the tongue and quill format for the letter. Now, if this is a civilian author for your letter, they can use whatever professional letter format they would like to use to submit. Okay. And then just make sure that all those letters are down to one page. That really helps the board focus in. As we mentioned, we get a lot of packages. And with all of the components of each package, we want to streamline the experience for the board member to give you, the best interface with your package. All right. So then going down to the interview, just to let you know that the interview guidance has been posted, and it is also at the same site on the KX as you will find the application. Okay. So let's move on to section 8, which is shadowing. Several questions about that. Can I shadow providers other than a PA who have been through IPAP? So you can shadow family medicine physicians, nurse practitioners, which can help you get a sense of what the family practice life will be like, what a day-to-day schedule looks like. But definitely when it comes to your role as a PA, we do want you to spend the majority of your time shadowing a family medicine PA. You can shadow like medicine PAs or specialty PAs to get a flavor for what the other PA daily lifestyles are. But because when you graduate, you will be going to family medicine, we want you to understand what you're getting into, and also that are you really suitable for this profession? This is really what's going to help you make some decisions and allow your shadowing PA to write that letter of recommendation that's required. Okay, so medical clearances, we got a couple very specific medical clearance questions. And what our recommendation is that you definitely go to your PCM for those questions. Our medical standards, they're the ones that are going to be filling out the 422. That's not necessarily in our lane to answer those specific questions, so please redirect those back to your PCM. And then in section 8C, the fitness reports, the question was, do I have to fill out multiple memos on each fitness exemption or just one? And we just want one MFR that talks about all of the fitness exemptions so we can explain. IPAP is a very rigorous course. You still have to maintain your military fitness. There's a lot of study time. There's a lot of sitting time at IPAP. And so going into the program with solid fitness scores will really help you make sure you get through IPAP and out the other side with maintaining your fitness. All right. So we'll go back over to Michelle for some of the personnel action questions.
Okay, so we're in section 9. And so the question was, if selected with a DEROS, can it be changed if I am stationed overseas? So I work all of those issues out before the PSDM is even published. That's why it takes me a little bit of time, because I'm going through each select. I'm querying all of where they are. Do they have a DEROS? What's their time on station? What's the best class to fit them in? All of that gets worked out on a case-by-case basis, and I work that. So the answer to the question is, can the DEROS be changed? Yes, and I will facilitate that through the appropriate assignment officers. The next question was Unicats. And yes, it is open as of Monday. So if you applied last year and do you still need to reorder transcripts, or are they already saved in Unicast? So if you have a Unicast ID, that will flip over. If you added a class, changed the transcript in any way, you will need to reorder a transcript to reflect the current status in your academic transcripts. So if they were from last year, they're going to be there. They need to be updated. That's something that you'll have to do additionally. And all of those transcripts will need to be sent to the transcript processing center, and all of that information is address and FedEx email. They're different depending on the mode in which you do that. So you can look at that on your guidance. And then all the points of contact information is readily available to you. And there's people monitoring the org boxes to get you answers as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize that for any queries prior to actually putting in an application, should go to the IPAP admin cell versus calling Ms. Cardassi. And the reason for that is that in our BSc branch, we have many, many projects. We have many different pathways, several training platforms, and IPAP is not the only job that Ms. Cardassi has. And so we appreciate if you could initially direct all questions to the IPAP admin cell. And then once the application is put in, and if there's questions, then Ms. Cardassi is the point of contact from that point on. And all that is listed in the guidance. So make sure you're putting in some comments on topics for future broadcasts. And at this point, I think we are going to take your questions and see what you've got for us and how we can answer you. Do we have a first question?
Yes, ma'am. Someone asked, how long should their application be, as in pages?
I would say if there is a place in Unicast to put information, they should fill each of those topics with the data. And if the data does not apply to them, I would submit a document that says not applicable. That way, when the board sees the Unicast application, we know that every topic in the Unicast application has been addressed, and that versus coming up across a blank page, as a board member, if you say not applicable, I know you addressed that and you didn't need to put something there. If it's blank, I wonder as a board member. So
yeah, I think in Unicast it won't even let you just leave it blank. You'll have to upload a blank form that tells you that you've recognized that this is not applicable, and then type NA on a piece of paper and upload that in that section for you to move on to the next section in Unicast.
that's good advice.
Is there a template for the Air Force PA to follow for the personal interview?
There is not a template for them to follow. We have guidance that we send out via emails to all of our active duty PAs, and in our newsletter for the Society of Air Force PAs, we put information about interviews and what we're looking for. If an active duty PA is writing a letter and is not sure, please have them contact myself, Major Schultz, Colonel Matthews, who's our Associate Corps Chief for PAs.
The time in service for officers was 6 years for this application cycle, and that it was disqualifying. But would that be something that could still be waived? I was under the impression that it was something that was waiverable.
Now, the reason we changed the time in service for our officers is that we were running into senior officers, some majors that were going through IPAP and getting to their first duty station as a PA, and they were learning to be a PA, and they needed to be working on their officership for promotion. So it was hurting some of our officers to be able to be successful BSCs if, as a major, they were learning their job at the same time. So to better take care of the members and not set them up for such a difficult pathway, we reduced the rank and the time in service for our officers.
Is the commander's LOR just I highly recommend on the template, or will they be able to add more to the template?
No, they will not be allowed to add any more to the template. Please just use the template for the commander's letter.
Okay. If I took A&P back in 2009, but took the second one now and attained a high grade, is that looked upon negatively because the first one was almost 10 years ago at the 10-year limit?
Yeah, that's something that you could apply. You're certainly meeting the prerequisites based on the application guidance. But the more recent the class, the better it's going to set you up for success within our program.
Okay, and I took an SRB during my reenlistment. Per AFI, I'm at risk of paying back my bonus if I don't fulfill at least 50% of my commitment. Other branches of service consider this program career progression, thus an easier career release and no worry about paying back the bonus. Do you have any insight to this?
So if you're in that position, I request a waiver through reenlistment's office, and we work to make that something that is waived if you are in that situation. That gets worked on a case-by-case basis. So if you have specific questions about yours, SRB, contact me and we'll work through that.
Will age be a factor in the selection process? I will be 19 when I submit my application.
Absolutely not. So every time we put out the PSDM with the names of the selects in the spring, it also gives you some statistics on the average age, the average time service, SAT scores, and other information. That's an average. So if the average age, I think it was 27, 28, that means we have people that are 18, 19 applying, and we have those in their 30s applying. So it is based on the quality of the record and not the age of the applicant.
How are online classes weighted against in-person classes by the board?
So the preference is traditional brick and mortar school because that's what you're going to encounter with our program. Now we do take into consideration the fact that we're in the military, and sometimes you guys are going to get stationed at bases where you can't take those traditional classes, or you deploy and life happens to you. So we do look at that and certainly take it into consideration. Now, if your entire course load is done through online classes, well then that's not looked on as favorably because that's not what you're going to be doing when you attend our course.
When we select individuals, we want them to, one, be a great PA in the future and be able to get through IPAP. So that's some of the decisions and some of the criteria is based on meeting those two requirements. Because IPAP is incredibly difficult. It is, as we say, it's education through fire hose. It is an 8-hour day in class at a very high tempo, and we need to make sure that you have the academic background to be successful. We want you to be successful, and that's why we are kind of picky about the requirements.
Can someone on a controlled tour code 50, like a special duty, apply and get selected even if they have only been at that assignment for a year but has more than 4 years time on station?
So, if you put in an application, then I will work those kinds of issues with your assignment officer. You have to have the 12 months time on station, so it sounds like you already do. But a code 50, you applied for that job that you're on a code 54 a lot of times. So again, it'll be a case-by-case basis. That's why after the application process, you have to contact me to make sure that I can get you released to continue in the program.
In terms of time in service, can applicants with less than 2 years time in service at the time of application submission still be eligible to apply for the current FY19 cycle?
I think our minimum is 2 years. So they currently have 2 years. They're fine.
Applicants with less than 2 years.
Less than 2 years.
Can they still apply?
Well, they have to have 2 years when they go to the program. So if they currently have less than 2 years, but we don't send them to we put them in a later class so they can make sure they have those 2 years at that time, yes.
If one can't get a PA in family health, would shadowing a flight medicine PA be acceptable?
As I stated earlier, then we definitely want you to have most of your time in family health because that's what you're going to be doing when you graduate. Getting a flavor for what PAs do in other specialties is absolutely, we recommend it. It's good to have going into school to see what the options are on the other side, but you will be doing family medicine for your first tour.
Why is a GRE score not accepted in lieu of a SAT score?
That comes down to an accreditation standard with the Accreditation Review Committee for PAs. So it's a standard that's across the services. So unfortunately, at this point, we have to utilize SAT as an entrance prerequisite.
Are there any opportunities to change specialties after serving as a PA in family health? For example, switching to pediatrics.
Pediatrics is not a specialty that Air Force PAs are in. As I mentioned earlier, we have surgery PAs, we have ortho PAs, emergency medicine PAs. Those are fellowship trained opportunities that once you are on active duty and serve in family health that you can apply for. Those opportunities